Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for this virtual event in support of this actual book, Eat, Drink, and Be Wary, Cautionary Tales by Kathy Biehl. I'm Noah Diamond, a writer and a performer and a friend. I've had the great privilege of knowing and collaborating with Kathy for many years now on various Marx Brothers projects and other things, including this book, which I worked on the interior design for and some of the exterior design too. So first things first, just some housekeeping notes. If everyone other than Kathy could keep your cameras off and your microphones muted, it'll help us avoid any video or audio bleed as we get through the readings and the conversations. However, it will be interactive, and we'll get to that in just a moment. I just want to say, if you do not own a copy of Eat, Drink, and Be Wary, or if you know anyone who does not own at least one copy of Eat, Drink, and Be Wary, you can go to ninthhouse.biz. Ninth House is the publisher. It's 9THHOUSE.biz. In fact, I wonder, do we have the technology to put that web address up on the screen? I think, there we go. It's amazing what we can do with computers now. Ninthhouse.biz. There you can find links to purchase the book, the paperback, the hardcover, or the ebook from various booksellers, large and small. Ninthhouse.biz. We also want to note that today is December 7th, and December 10th, which is this Friday, is the last opportunity to buy an autographed copy and receive it in time for Christmas. The question of whether this book makes a great gift or not is something we'll probably get into this evening as the event continues, but we can all consider that this Friday is the deadline for autographed copies. Tonight, for our entertainment, Kathy will be reading some short selections from Eat, Drink, and Be Wary, and she will also be answering our questions. I have some questions for Kathy, and I hope you do too. If you do, at any time in the evening, starting now, you can submit questions using the chat feature here in Zoom. If you want to submit questions, you can open a private chat with me, and then nobody, including Kathy, will see your question in advance. Or if you don't care about that, you can just ask them in the public chat. But keep them coming at any time, and I will be harvesting your questions throughout the next hour or so and posing them to Kathy during the conversation segments that will come in between the reading. Let's get on with the show and with this piece of work that the Midwest Book Review recently called inherently fascinating, impressively thoughtful, thought-provoking, extraordinary, unique, and unreservedly recommended. Not so bad. I assume that most of us here know who Kathy Biehl is, and that she requires no introduction. But because Kathy is such a protean figure, because she's such a multi-hyphenate, it's possible to know Kathy pretty well and only have been exposed to one or two of her many facets. Some of us know Kathy primarily as a writer, some as a performer, an actor, a vocalist, and a musician. Some know her as an astrologer or a lawyer, some as a bon vivant and raconteur, but the luckiest among us know Kathy as a friend who devotes the same generosity of thought and care and art to the people around her that she does to her many kinds of work. She has been described as Hunter S. Thompson without the drugs, with a dose of Fran Lebowitz, the sarcasm of Anthony Bourdain, and the true enjoyment of Rick Steves. She has described herself as a third-rate goddess, a pretentious socialite, a Scheherazade of weird, and a pseudo-food expert. Ladies and gentlemen, and others, here is your friend and mine, Kathy Biehl.
Brief correction, those last four titles were actually given to me in print, all by men. I have actually been called those things. Well, food is something that we're everybody, well, except for one person I've ever met in my life, is fairly obsessed with. And I have spent years exploring all of the different roles that it plays in our lives well beyond nutrition. It's a currency for love. It's a substitute for a lot of things. It is something that you stuff into weird old psychic wounds. It's a link to earlier times and traditions. It's an excuse to socialize, and increasingly, it's a form of entertainment. And I am going to start with reading a brief selection from my essay, Table for One. Excuse me. I enjoy eating alone. No one has a say but the voices in my head, and when they're in charge, anything's possible. Steamed broccoli for breakfast, eggs and sausage for dinner, or maybe just a piece of fruit. Cookies during meal prep, during the meal, and after too, if they're still appealing. Who knows, I might even make food choices and combinations that match just about anyone's definition of a proper meal, which is actually what happens most of the time. Predictability isn't the goal. Happy making tastes are, and all the better if they arrive with fun and adventure on the side. The freedom is what I appreciate most. It's liberating to assemble a meal and eat it without concern for another person's needs, expectations, or reactions. If I cook for someone or suggest a restaurant, I go to trouble to come up with something that meets the person's tastes. I left political cooking behind in my 20s when a then frequent dining companion not so wrongly interpreted my reliance on the vegetarian epicure as foisting an agenda on my audience. This approach is not so much due to codependency, though a touch may well be in the picture. It just strikes me as considerate and good manners. If I'm the only one who's going to eat, on the other hand, my tastes are all that matter. I'll try experiments and make substitutions to which I would never subject anyone else. What, no olive oil? Well, what if I seared that pork chop in Pinot Noir vinegar? Fortunately, I am not fussy. Fending for myself is not only liberating, it's relaxing. I don't have to impress anyone, be an expert, or contend with someone's judgments, assumptions, or insecurities. I get to eat for myself and as myself, and not as a food writer, a persona that has a way of popping up after hours, whether I invite her or not. The label stirs complex emotions in some people, often a jumble of envy, intimidation, and something that looks like awe. Once a filter like that locks in any shared meal, even any restaurant suggestion, especially any restaurant suggestion, can lead to uncomfortable complications. Home cooks asking, "Are you going to review this meal?" and laughing nervously, very nervously, and backsplash on your professional competence and reputation. When I'm alone, the dynamics are simpler. They're just me and food and whatever is going on in my head. No matter where it takes place, the experience of eating alone leads directly to the question of how comfortable you are with your own company, which is to say, with yourself. The prospect makes some people uneasy. When no one's around to provide a buffer, they'll enlist other distractions to ward off awareness of, or perish forfend, examination of the self. Watching TV or reading magazines, newspapers, the back of cereal boxes, it's all an equivalent of white noise, blocking out whatever is on the inside. When people share food, especially if one of them was the cook, the subtext usually runs something like this. Let me prove my love to you with this delicious meal, and you can prove your love in return by eating a lot. Second or third helpings, please. Funny how the exchange of love aspect of eating disappears when the only one person is at the table. Have you ever sensed this kind of motivation in meals you've had by yourself? Well, I certainly haven't. My growing penchant for cooking full meals is a start, but I still accord other people a lot more consideration in the kitchen than I give myself. The exchange is possible, though I've heard, the exchange is possible, though I've heard of one person who mastered it. He was a co-worker of a friend of mine in a design studio a few decades back. Each day at lunch, the co-worker would pull out a tablecloth, napkin, plate, flatware, candlestick, and a single wine glass, the only one he owned. After arranging the table, he would set out and calmly eat a full meal he'd prepared the night before. Add to the novelty of the scene the fact that the coworker was a Black man in a largely Caucasian company. One day, my friend asked why he went to all this trouble. The answer? Because I deserve it. The voices in my head are still chewing on that one.
Everyone's muted, but everyone is surely applauding.
Yeah.
Well, so let's start, since we have just gotten a taste of that essay. It originally appeared in My Table, a Houston dining magazine, in 2009, and the pieces in this book are from your history as a food writer. So I want to start with a two-part question. One is, to what extent have these pieces been revised since their original appearance? And when you read a piece like this, does it feel like your younger self, or can you still sign off on every sentiment in them?
That's very interesting. There were a couple of things that actually got excised because they just don't fit well in the world as it's become, if that makes sense. I had a millennial, actually, whatever the generation is after the millennials, a Gen Z beats me, as my copy editor. And she kept pointing out things that I just look at it and go, good point. Yeah, didn't see it that way then, see it that way now, getting rid of it. But apart from that, no, nothing. And a lot of it is still, I'd still actually really enjoy eating by myself. So, but for a lot of what's in here, I would still say, except in certain instances, I wouldn't get myself in those situations again. For example, the whole thing involving Big Creek Bar, I would not be in that situation again.
The specific adventures recounted in the
Some
book
specific adventures I would not take part in again. That is correct.
may belong to another time.
Yeah.
And the second part of that question is, I wonder if do you think like a food writer every time you encounter food, every time you cook or eat? I once knew somebody who wrote movie reviews and stopped doing it because it was interfering with his ability to enjoy movies. And I wonder if you feel any of that.
It's certainly come back. Since I put this collection together, I am looking at things the way I used to, in an evaluative method, and that can be exhausting. I mean, actually, when you're in a lot of restaurant reviewing, it does end up getting extraordinarily tiresome. And then when you go to a restaurant, when you're just going there because you want to eat, you're not really off duty in a way, because you're just attuned to all the things going on. Now, I will say, when I was covering specialty food, so I wrote a food news column for a decade, and that would be going to the Javits Convention Center and seeing all the ridiculous new products that were out, and covering trends in produce and things you wouldn't even think would be news, but trust me, it's news. That was actually really fun, and I bizarrely love to go to a grocery store I've never been to before and see what the stock choices are, what people have chosen to buy, and how the stores are laid out and how they group things. I don't understand why this amuses me, but it does. And it's an outgrowth of that. It definitely is an outgrowth of that. And I went through a spell in between really heavily writing professionally, taking a breather, and then pulling this together. In the middle spell, I did go through a phase of doing a lot of stuff on a food blog and like trying to recreate recipes and documenting. I would run into something in a restaurant and go, can I do this? And infusing wine and beer and stuff. I was doing that for a while.
The book seems it's somewhat divided between food writing the way people think of it, a description of a trip to a restaurant or a particular meal, and then there's also food writing in the book that's about things that happen to you seemingly through no choice of yours. Like in the wonderful chapter, The Dangers of Mall Walking, you're just visiting a shopping mall and you, uh, uh, well, it does become voluntary, but initially, involuntarily, are sort of roped into a taste test. Do food adventures seem to find you whether you're looking for them or not?
I am a magnet for this sort of thing, and there must be something about me that is more open to them than others. I mean, I spent 17 hours in a van with an 8-foot hot dog on the roof of it several summers ago. It was the New Jersey Star Ledger had this thing called the Munchmobile, and I was chosen to ride in the Munchmobile. So I will sometimes deliberately have a food adventure, but I generally have a nose for self-amusement, and this stuff does have a way of finding me. And it may be that I'm just more open to it than other people, or maybe I'm a magnet. I don't know.
We got a couple of questions from the audience. Here's a good one from Bill Griffith. Bill wants to know, who would you invite to your fantasy dinner party, and what would you and your guests dine on?
I'm guessing you would want to be one of the guests, Bill. I've had many dinner parties at his house. Um, let's see. I actually had to answer that for an application for some, uh, maybe it was a Rhodes Scholarship application when I was going off to graduate school. I would want good conversationalists. I mean, I might want Robert Benchley there if he weren't drinking much, because he's pleasant and also extremely witty. Um, that's a tough one. That's a very tough one. Who else would I want to eat with? Want
Well,
somebody.
just you and Benchley could be very pleasant.
Actually, that could be extremely pleasant, especially if he's not into a pitcher of martinis. I would not want to eat with MFK Fisher, who's a major food writer. And I think, Bill, you have stumped me on this one. I don't know. I don't know what I would want the meal to be. It would be something that somebody is absolutely in love with. Oh, wait a minute. Stanley Tucci can cook for me. That will do just fine. I will have an Italian meal cooked by Stanley Tucci. I'll be very happy. And he can tell me all about it while he's doing it. That does it right there. There's my answer.
That's a good answer. Kevin DeBose asks, what is your current favorite grocery store? And he specifies this could be individual stores or supermarket chains.
Trader Joe's. Mm-hmm. Yep, not Whole Foods, which I represented years and years ago. Um, but the one I make special trips to Trader Joe's. Yep. And then there's also one other thing. There's a huge produce market that I think is Korean owned near me, and I go there for my produce. Huge produce market.
All right. Amanda Sisk asks, do you or will you eat fast food? If so, what? Are they guilty pleasures, or do you taste it as much as the other things you mindfully eat?
Oh man, I banned fast food years ago. This is one thing that is different than what I wrote in the book. I have backslid. I have been known to eat fast food. I will eat. Now, it depends on what you call fast food. I will eat. I think the worst of it is a Wendy's double Dave cheeseburger. So it's a double cheeseburger because it's got cheese into 2 layers. And Wendy's fries, if they're hot, are also worth it. I categorize things as worth it and not worth it. And in fast food, that's pretty much what I think is worth it. And I've been known to eat an Impossible Burger at Burger King, but that's about it. Other than that, I stay away from it.
I wonder if before we get into the next excerpt, could you give us a sort of capsule version of how you became a food writer? It wasn't a goal pursued since childhood. It was another thing that sort of
It
happened to you.
sort of happened. Yeah, well, I was a freelance writer. I was doing a lot of freelance writing, and it tended to be adventuresome, exploratory, quirky, looking for people who were doing unusual or interesting things. Um, and I got a phone call from someone who is actually here in the house tonight, saying I've been doing these. Uh, my law school friend Kevin DuBose had been doing the bar listings for Texas Monthly for Houston and was going to give it up and asked if I wanted to do it. And they took me on, and I did that for 2.5 years. And it was, an excuse to get paid to go running around to a bunch of bars at night and get your. It was during the time when you could smoke in bars, and so my clothing would have to air out for 2 or 3 days before I could even wash it. They would smell so horrible. But it was still fun, and people would go with you because like, hey, I'll buy you drinks. Come with me. Let's go to these bars. And I have to go to 2 or 3 of them in a night. And I don't know if that's what got me on somebody's radar, but I'll let that go. And I continued doing whatever amused me. It was a lot of offbeat travel at that point that I was writing. And a few years later, I was ambushed by someone from the Houston Business Journal saying that they'd lost their reviewer and asking if I wanted to do it because I had the snappy style they were looking for. And I actually said, no. And he phoned me the next day and patched his editor in. And I went, okay, I'll try. And I ended up doing it for 9.5 years. And it ended up being really, really fun. And that was anonymous. And then it just it grew from there. I mean, at that point, I was getting too exhausted to do much pitching of other freelance work. And I did for a long time. At the end of the 90s, I was writing for a bunch of publications, including one online that Microsoft was running. They had it in Houston, they had it in New York. It was called Sidewalk, and it was a city guide. And I did everything but restaurants for it. And I was writing about restaurants for the Houston Press, and also still anonymously reviewing a slightly carefully guarded role. The people at the press never knew I was doing it. And when I moved up to New York, I just kind of parlayed that into food writing. I did some stuff for Time Out. I reviewed restaurants for Time Out and contributed to a dining guide there. And then that just kind of petered out, and I got sick of it and stuck with writing about food for 2 different
Um,
publications.
Excellent. And we should say that although many of the pieces in the book draw from your years in Houston, not all of them. There's some northeastern located pieces too, including an outstanding piece about Miners Fair in New Jersey. Um, and so it's not a regionally limited book by any means. All right, you want to set up the second excerpt for us?
Well, this one is regional.
Excellent.
This one is about all right, this is from Eating Out is Fun. Ha. Um, this is just, I walk into restaurants with some knowledge of what it takes to run them. A 5-month stint as a tip slave taught me enough for a lifetime. At the end of college, despite my bookworm demeanor, I got a job as a cocktail waitress on the Upper Greenville Avenue single strip in North Dallas. The time and place were both ground zero for happy hour. It was the height of the 1970s, when 2-for-1 drink prices were years away from state prohibition, and I was working in Party Animal Central, the very place that pioneered frozen margaritas, rather the frozen margarita machine. I had the idea that the job would be relatively easy and the money good. I was wrong about both. The first day alone was a crash course in the unrelenting tension and frustration that pervade food service. I walked into the kitchen and saw a waitress hurl a tray across the kitchen at a waiter and unleash a blood-curdling torrent of swearing. What in the world would make somebody do that, I wondered. Lots of things, I soon learned. Nothing ever pushed me to such a satisfying self-indulgent display as that waitress, whom I'm pretty sure quit that same day. But within a month, I was telling a manager I would throw up if he didn't get a chili relleno he wanted me to taste out of my face. I could cope with pranks. Hold that thought. I could brush off the Cat Stevens lookalike Pakistani bartender biting my shoulder while I was hoisting a tray of double your pleasure margaritas for takeoff. I could even deflect come-ons with split-second timing, not to mention enough wit to leave the refused favorably disposed toward the critical matter of the tip. What was tricky and the source of constant aggravation was being first in line if the customers fire. I always owned up to my own flubs and got adept at projecting, oh, we'll pay for the dry cleaning over my shoulder while dashing back to the kitchen for a towel to wipe up a drink I'd spilled on a customer. Spills I got down to about once a week. Almost every shift, though, I had to take the heat for someone else's action. A waiter in the restaurant bungling a drink order. Me, you didn't order a Cuddy and Coke. Repulsed customer, no, I said Bacardi. And a waitress swiping what was rightfully my order of nachos, and customers trying to hold me responsible for what they had ordered. College students and high school counselors especially suffered a memory loss on arrival of the bill that subtracted a couple of rounds from the number I'd rung up and inevitably delivered. As far as management was concerned, collections were my problem. No, one way or the other, the register amounts were coming out of my till at the end of the shift. I may have run to the parking lot after a person who'd walked a bill, but no matter how badly I wanted to smash my tray on someone's head, I never lost respect for the fact that the customer's wallet held the ultimate trump card. Circling back to that, hold that thought, pranks. Hell, I could pull them off with the best of them, and some of my coworkers were aces of stupidity who'd turned the restaurant into a playground for our personal amusement. My specialty was bringing reading material that freaked out one of the managers. After he was startled to see me reading a German book during a day shift, not because I was reading, which I was allowed to do when no one was in the cantina, but because it was in a foreign language other than Spanish, I made a point to throw him off balance. A Russian primer did it best. My God, that's Outer Mongolian, he shrieked. In the universal bag of tricks, though, tortillas were an especially versatile tool. We'd roll them into cylinders, stick toothpicks through jalapeno slices, 2 on each end, to suggest wheels, and run the makeshift racing cars across tables before customers were seated. Or we'd cut them into X's and O's and play tic-tac-toe on top of the crosshatched designs that had been conveniently laid onto the tabletops, again, before customers were there. We once managed to slip a tortilla prank into a customer-occupied territory. In the safety of the kitchen, we cut a smiley face out of a tortilla, rolled a wad of foil into a hook, and hung the face on the back of an unsuspecting waiter's apron as he headed out into the dining room. The fact that we laughed ourselves into dribbling, quivering incoherence over that one is probably as much a commentary on the level of tension we endured as it is on the level of our maturity. But the best and most ongoing prank of all was one that we had to live through straight-faced. The menu had a special dinner called, in an unintentional stroke of genius, the Revolution platter, that inevitably got ordered by packs of old Anglo ladies. The way this was served played up the celebration aspect. Every waiter in the place had to pitch in, don a sombrero, and sing while loading platters onto the table. And what they were to sing was La Cucaracha, that catchy tune about the hard-to-catch varmint we call a cockroach, or maybe something else. as if there were not enough amusement value in serenading affluent blue hairs about an insect associated with filth, while serving something named after a bloody break from tyranny, the waiters invariably went one step further. They rewrote the words, which were in Spanish, of course, to slip in descriptions of sexual acts upon their customers' female ancestors. The old women always beamed.
Excellent. That piece in particular makes me think about how the timing of this book coming out at a time when anything that deals with the communal aspects of food eating, particularly restaurants, almost seemed like a dispatch from another time because we were and still are in the midst of the pandemic. What are your thoughts on the restaurant experience these days? Are there any recent experiences you've had in restaurants that have illustrated the way these things have changed, or at least been subject to some change in the last year and a half?
Well, a couple of things. Many of the places that I would go that were near me turned into pretty much takeout only, and did manage to stay in business. They were, well, the ones that small places in my town. But it's been kind of startling to head for some place and then see that it's shuttered. I mean, the number of restaurants and cafes and bars that haven't survived this is pretty daunting. I've seen big changes in New York City, the way a lot of places got around the fear of being in a closed space with other people was to build these little, take over the sidewalks and put tables on the sidewalks and build these 3-quarter enclosures with little heaters and lots of lights. And I went a couple of times when things were still pretty dicey. And my friends, when I would do this, my friends and I would talk a lot to the waiter, because I don't know, it's like letting him know that we understand you're here kind of under combat conditions and we really appreciate what's going on. But I have noticed, since things have been normalizing a tiny bit, a couple of things in particular. One of them was my little neighborhood place where the waitress knows who we are and starts bringing things as soon as we get there. The last time I went there, it was almost 45 minutes before our food showed up, and it made no sense to me. I mean, this is the sort of place where stuff comes, goes, it's fast, it's fast. This is a very, very modest restaurant. And I don't know if the kitchen was backed up. I don't know if the staff is a lot slower, but it made me start thinking the way we judge what's going on and experience it maybe needs to be a little different now. And I've had I've been kind of amazed that some of the phenomena that I wrote about. I have one of my pieces in here is a long screed when service goes to the dogs, and I just categorize the ridiculous things that go wrong in restaurants. And I'm just amazed that the phenomena of the amazing disappearing waiter exists. Like, why would you, when it's time to give your customer the check, why would you become scarce? But this happened recently at a place that I go to play trivia. Like, why is the waiter not here? Where did she go? The other thing is through unusual conditions, I ended up being taken to a very upper crust private club in New York, the University Club. I have a friend who amuses himself with these things. And when he comes into town, I get to be his beneficiary. And we've been there before, and the main dining room upstairs is like Hogwarts. And this wait service was always incredibly attentive, because I mean, people who belong to these places and go to these places pay a phenomenal amount, and so they are generally treated with something bordering on obsequiousness. So the last time we were there, we were in the main dining room downstairs, and we had a waiter who just basically couldn't be bothered. And I kept looking at him like, are you sick of your job? Are you just are you fed up with white people? Which is a funny way of, I recognize that there's something potentially offensive in what I just said there, but I started thinking maybe the way because of how pummeled the service staff has been traditionally in the restaurant industry. I mean, you and I have talked about this. That's a grueling profession, and people historically have been badly underpaid and really abused by it. And maybe the wait staff has just hit critical mass of, I'm not going to put up with it anymore. I don't know. And I'd maybe start wondering if different criteria for actually analyzing restaurants is what's going to develop out of this. I don't know quite yet.
Yeah, it's one of the things that your book made me reflect on last year and earlier this year when we were working on it, is that waiting tables, it wasn't an easy job before the pandemic. It certainly, like so many other aspects of our lives, took on several extra layers of difficulty. Actually, both the experience of dining in a restaurant and the experience of working in one are different and more difficult now. A question about food venues has come in from Denise Russo. This question is a nice piece of food writing in its own right. Denise says, I love a dirty dog from a hot dog cart on a crisp fall day in New York City. Do you think certain venues make food or drink taste even better?
Oh, absolutely. White Castle. The only way I would ever eat a White Castle slider is if it's in one of the five boroughs, in especially a kind of a dicey, dangerous place. There's something about there's an edginess that comes with it. I'm definitely a big fan of venues, and that I do think that's part of the experience. Food isn't just about what we're ingesting; it is about the totality, the context that it's in, the people you're with, and there are places you go to. Somebody else might make something that tastes just as good, but there's this extra energetic element that comes from where you are. So definitely, yeah.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons we go to restaurants, isn't it? It's not just for the food, it's for atmosphere, it's for the company, it's for the experience of being there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here is another question. Hold on just a moment. Another question from Bill Griffith. Bill Griffith wants to know, will there be a part two of Eat, Drink, and Be Wary?
I do not know. There is the next collection that I'm pulling together is Confessions of a Third-Rate Goddess. But at the moment, I'm not planning another like a food-centric book. But who knows? Anything is possible.
Well, since you've alluded to the third-rate goddess title, I must apologize for attributing those descriptions to you in my intro. But since we know they did not come from you originally, I think we can all agree second rate, right? At least second rate.
Oh, no, I actually got an explanation of it that made complete sense. I was fine with it. This came from a minister.
Well, I guess he would know.
First rate is like on the level of Hera, and then second rate would be like Persephone. So third rate is Goddess in the Flesh.
Kathy Biehl.
I'm fine with it.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for some more questions to come in from our audience, are you ready for a lightning round?
Yes.
Okay, this is a lightning round. These don't have to be one-word answers, but brief answers.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll fly through them. We're about to learn more about Kathy in a compressed period of time than ever before.
Uh-huh.
All right, here we go. Name a food you love that is not mentioned in the book.
Saag paneer.
What is the most recent food you cooked or prepared?
Oatmeal.
If you could have only one dessert for a year, what would it be?
A dream bar from Cafe Express in Houston.
What are you having for dinner tonight?
Possibly nothing.
All right, somebody send Kathy some food. And here are some questions that stray from food a little bit. What composer, it could be any composer from world history, what composer should score the movie of your life?
Probably Danny Elfman.
If you had to wear the same color every day, what would it be?
Purple.
Name two films that you think would make a perfect double feature.
Huh. That takes some thinking. Wow, I wish you'd given me that one in advance.
Well, if Stanley Tucci and Robert Benchley were coming over for dinner sometime, and you had to show them a couple of flicks.
The Moon's Our Home, Henry Fonda and Margaret Sullivan, and Palm Beach Story. How's that? That's weird, but that's what I would say. So.
Excellent. I don't know the first film you mentioned, but I like the Palm Beach Story, and I'll put the other one on my list. Now, a quick run of James Lipton questions. If you were on Inside the Actors Studio,
God.
you would be asked. Ready? All right. What is your favorite word?
I don't have one.
What is your least favorite word?
Blurb.
What sound or noise do you love?
A dog or a cat lapping food.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Human eating food.
And what is your favorite curse word?
Oh, I'm not putting this on tape. I am not recording this one. I've got one. It's like it's yeah. Yeah. It's way
Fair
up.
enough.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. But we all can go home tonight or retire tonight knowing that Kathy does have a favorite curse word.
Oh, it's like level 5 when it comes out. I've actually been asked, like, is this level? Like, So, yeah.
Does that tell us something? Is it a 4-syllable word?
No, it's fine.
All right. Kevin DeBose asks, after a lifetime of enjoying eating, it would be absurd to ask you to pick a favorite restaurant or meal, but can you, off the top of your head, mention a handful of memorable dining experiences, highbrow or lowbrow or both? Wow.
Yes. There was a cafe on the banks of the Seine in Paris, across the river from Notre Dame, where my friend, who now belongs to all these private clubs, knew the owner. And we just, I don't even know what I ate. It was called Le Trou Normand, and I have terrible French pronunciation. And I don't even think I picked what I ate. I just sat back and was in awe, all of it. That would be one. Paris is the second one. Champagne and oysters at a bar outside the Paris Opera. Enchilada day at Langford Grocery in Houston. That may be my absolute favorite meal on the planet. It's Wednesdays. I time my trips to Houston around being able to get to Langford's for Wednesday. And there's another one in there somewhere. But that's at the top of the list.
Yeah. Ken Hansen has a comment, not a question, but he suggests Madam Satan would be a good movie choice.
Who wants to go to hell with Madam Satan?
Denise Russo asks, what song or kind of music makes the food on your palate sing?
Well, now that's interesting because noise level and what's going on orally, I really do believe affects how you experience a meal. And if a place is really, really noisy, unless it's like a happy party situation, I feel personally pummeled by it, which was part of why I had it in for one insanely popular restaurant in Houston years ago. I don't believe it's open anymore. So I think something that's somewhat quiet, maybe a little bit of movement to it, but not something that pummels people. So I don't, I mean, it depends on, for some people, swing, something that's kind of retro might be nice. Classical music upsets some people, but I think that there are some string quartets that could be wonderful to dine by. Kind of depends on the mood, what you're trying to create. And again, I'm really big on not pummeling people while they're eating. The effect that it actually has on your body and your energy level. It's one of my rants.
Do you listen to music when you're home? If you're home cooking or preparing a meal or just spending time alone, do you have music on most of the time?
Actually, very little of the time. I live in a lot of quiet, for whatever that means. I love music. I have it on in the car if I drive, but in my house, not very often.
Well, do you want to set up the next excerpt for us from Eat, Drink, or Be Wary? And I will remind our audience that if you know anybody who doesn't have a copy, ninthhouse.biz is the place to pick one up. Or it's really a portal to many places where you can pick one up, from Amazon or from independent booksellers if you prefer. And that this Friday is the last opportunity to get a signed copy before Christmas. Unless you go over to Kathy's house and have her sign it for you on the 24th.
And good luck getting here. Okay, this is from the crowd pleaser, The Joy of Junk Food. Nutrition has nothing to do with it. We eat most food because our bodies need something from it. We eat junk because we want it. Forget nutrition. It's not merely beside the point. It's rarely anywhere near the same universe as the point. And what would that be? Indulging in pure physical pleasure, devouring something that tastes so good and usually feels good too, and often indulging in more than a hint of rebellion as well. Most likely, someone somewhere told us not to, and so, of course, we're attracted. When a single bite can hold the promise of hedonism and defiance, is it any wonder we're hooked? Don't call this snack food. True, some snacks are junk and vice versa, but snack is too polite for the likes of junk. Snack smacks of serving bowls and high budget advertising campaigns and leaves the door open to edibles with actual nutritional content, like raisins or carrots. It misses out entirely on the potential for messiness and sleaziness and furtiveness and outright slumming inherent in junk food. Junk food is a luxury. It makes the statement, however unconscious, that we are sufficiently well off to eat solely out of desire. It is a treat. For a lot of us, junk is a break from our daily diet. For most of us, it's something our childhood caretakers doled out sparingly on special occasions. Sure, that was for our own good, but the tactic sent a message that has elevated junk food to hallowed status in many a psyche. Soft drinks were so rare an indulgence in the Spartan upbringing of one of my friends from childhood that they still inspire reverence in him, despite the rarefied dining he has enjoyed for decades as an international investment banker based in Europe. They sealed his devotion at the age of 10 at most during his first flight by himself from the Rio Grande Valley to Dallas, where he got to have all the Dr. Pepper and Coke he could drink. He remembers the thrill better, or so he says, than the free flowing caviar and champagne on Swiss Air day flights from Libreville to whichever European capital was his home at the time. Being so special, junk food is a reward as well. A use we also learned from our early gatekeepers who would shake their heads at the sometimes counterproductive ramifications. Another friend who incidentally claims to go to McDonald's for the salads admits to crowning a several-mile jog in his younger days with an entire pint of Baskin and Robbins butter pecan ice cream in the parlor routinely. Junk food is naughty. It's the bad boy with the motorcycle, the girl whose popularity is the very reason you can't bring her home to meet your family. It's what you're not supposed to eat before dinner, or it'll ruin your appetite, or maybe not ever eat at all. Junk food is where we get to break the rules, even the ones we've made for ourselves, and especially the ones we got from our parents. Junk food is fun too, and not merely for giving a little rein to our inner adolescence. It's casual party fare, commonplace to the point of being inescapable with all manner of recreation, from going to the movies, an amusement park, or a street fair, to watching a game on TV with pals. So the sight of it signals good times ahead. Most of all, it's fun to eat. Junk food strips refinement and manners from eating and delivers a primal experience. With few exceptions, junk requires you to pick it up and eat it with your fingers. When it drips or oozes, as do melting ice cream cones or cream-filled donuts, that's a cue to catch the escapee in midair. If you fail, no problem. There'll be residue to be licked up once the main event is over. The most satisfying junk food is highly physical fare. It cracks, it crunches, it squishes. When it resists your bite and then shatters, it supplies immediate stress relief. The next time an unpleasantness ambushes you, try a couple of minutes of explosive crunching and see if you don't agree. And when multiple textures unfold in one bite, that's junk food nirvana as far as I'm concerned. Peanut M&Ms do the trick for me, unless they're stale. Soft peanuts sabotage the effect. If they don't for you, or even if they do, think of what it feels like to bite into a crisp corn chip dripping with soft, creamy dip. Or into French fries, fresh from the fire, when they have a slightly hardened exterior that cracks to expose a soft core. And it's tasty too. Junk food has a knack for larger-than-life entrances. It clobbers the tongue with exaggerated flavors and seasonings. Consider the borderline painful zing of hint of lime Tostitos, flamin' hot limon Cheetos, and atomic fireballs, the tang of sweet tarts and dill-flavored potato chips, the hyper-sweetness of Mr. Goodbar and Jelly Bellies. The more discomfort the flavorings trigger, the more they linger on after the last morsel has been downed, and in that lingering, awaken the desire for more. And therein lies one of the inherent dangers of junk food. Free will? Frito-Lay got it right with Bet You Can't Eat Just One. The slogan was meant for Lay's potato chips, but it applies to any type of junk. Junk food overrides the brain. It ignites a repetitive hand-to-mouth motion that hypnotizes the victim into automatic consumption. I'll just have a couple, you think, and the interplay of textures and tastes is over so soon that you pop in a few more. And when your eyes come back into focus, probably when you become aware of just how badly you crave a big gulp of some refreshing liquid, half the container or worse has disappeared, along with some small portion of your self-respect. I once sublet an apartment from someone who had the strength of will to leave behind an intact pint of coffee Haagen-Dazs, which was on all counts, item, flavor, and brand, an indulgence that I had not previously permitted myself. I stuck a spoon in at the start of a favorite sitcom, and long before the credits rolled, well, let's just say I don't judge my jogger friend.
Indeed, a pint of coffee Haagen-Dazs would not be resistible under any circumstances, let alone just sitting there in your own home. That was undoubtedly left in the freezer with the awareness that it couldn't last long.
I think she forgot about it.
It's hard to imagine. Here we are in our final segment. So, last chance to get your questions in for Kathy, if you would like to. I wanted to mention the piece you've just read from "The Joy of Junk Food" is one of my many favorite pieces in the book, and it's also one of the reasons why it really is a book that you want to hold in your hands. Along the bottoms of the pages of this chapter, there is what Kathy has called the junk food timeline.
And which Noah
Which gives
designed.
Yeah, I did some work on the design, but the whole thing is conceived and written by Kathy, and it's the idea here that is really champion. And it's kind of a visual supplement, but it tells you that, for example, popcorn is over 5,500 years old, and marshmallows have been around since 2000 BC. It's quite a nice supplementary feature. And it's in the ebook too. The ebook doesn't have quite as much design in it, but it does have the junk food timeline and many of the other visuals that are in the print version. Nancy Lynch wants to know, what is your favorite German comfort food? It's so rare to hear the words German and comfort together like that. And favorite German restaurants.
Uh, Weisswurst, which is made from something that I don't normally eat, which is veal. It has parsley in it. I like that because it is something that I had when I lived in Munich. So there's like an ancient history tether that's part of it. I mean, there are some things you eat because they link you back to an earlier part of your life. So I would say that. I like potato pancakes and really good Wiener Schnitzel, which is hard to find, which is, again, a cutlet of meat that I don't normally eat. And my favorite German restaurant actually serves none of these. It's in Dallas. It's near SMU. It's called Kubi's. And it's run by the family of a high school classmate of mine whose father was the founder of the place, had a brother in Germany who was a sausage maker. So it's authentic, it's real, and the food is consistently good, except they got rid of the Wurstsalat, which really upsets me. That was a reason to get a sandwich there, but it's not there anymore.
I've enjoyed a couple of great German meals with you at Rolf's on First Avenue.
Rolf's has become, Rolf's is very good, and it has now become discovered because of its perpetual Christmas decorations, and it's almost impossible to get into Rolf's now. Rolf's is underneath a very historic place where Groucho Marx had his first audition as a teenager and started his showbiz career.
That's right, and it's pure coincidence that the Marx Brothers have this German heritage and this important surviving location in Groucho's early career is located right over a fine German restaurant. Speaking of the Marx Brothers, Seth Sheldon has asked a question. Seth says, since you mentioned the ebook, perhaps one challenge I've had listening to these wonderful readings is being distracted by Kathy's mellifluous tones, which I've missed so much, and which prompts this question.
Yeah.
Are you doing an audiobook?
You're the third, fourth, fifth person to ask for that, and it's just a daunting prospect of actually the editing. It's not the recording so much. But enough people are asking for it. I should probably do it, because even strangers go, wow, that was really captivating. I'm like, well, yeah. Yeah.
Well, yes,
some people say they hear my voice. If they know me, they hear my voice when they're reading it. And I'm like, oh, how to just record this.
Yeah, that's true. And it is certainly true. Listening to you read from it always prompts the desire to have the whole book in an audio format. It's also just a natural for an author who is also a performer. But there's another truth about this book, and one of the reasons why, and I really do mean this sincerely, one of the reasons why it actually does make a great gift is because it's the kind of reading where you feel as though you're spending time with the author. whether you know the author personally, as many of us do, or not. It's very conversational. You feel as though you're spending time, you're being taken into the confidence of a trusted friend. Much the way Nora Ephron or James Thurber, you curl up with their books and you feel as though you just have good company for the evening. It's very much like that, and it is true that even if you're reading it on paper or on the screen of your device, the book has a very warm and wonderful authorial voice to it. And it does sound like you. I think those of us who know how you sound would agree with that. It's one of the things that makes it so real and good. Not a question, but a comment from Amanda Sisk. Amanda says, all in caps with a period after each word, "I am so hungry." Um, I'm sure many of us are having that response, and that is a response to the book too. It does. I guess it's the goal of any good food writing, is that it does kind of give you the appreciation of and the desire for food, the food being described, and also your own personal food adventures.
One, so two things in response to what you've just said. One is that I have heard from a number of friends the exact sentiment of, I feel like I'm having a conversation with you as they read this book. And some of them actually do attempt to have one. I get messages from people while they are reading. Like with immediate, I'll get a series of texts, I'll get email, I'll get Facebook messages. I'm not suggesting people do this, by the way. With a reaction to things as they're going through it, like in time present. And the second is a lot of people, especially with the cellular memory of food.
Kathy, I think you may be muted.
That was fun. I apologize. I got booted off. I don't know what happened. So to continue, a lot of people are having telling me that the cellular memory of food in particular, but I've seen it from junk food as well, triggers all kinds of memories and associations. And I have had one of my readings in an organic garden degenerated into all of these people talking about all of their favorite childhood junk food. And they were just this huge group conversation started with memories flying and memories flying. One person who decided to review the book ended up writing a long essay about all of the memories of her grandmother that it triggered. It wasn't so much a review of my book, but what it sparked in her. And that's pretty cool to me that happens.
Wow, yeah, that's lovely. And it is one of the points, you don't make it explicitly in the book, but it's one of the things that emerges from the book is that, why is food important? Because it connects us with people.
And with the past and with who we used to be.
Kevin DeBose wants to know, are you enjoying this food writer career revival as much as you seem to be? And he adds, I'm so happy for you in all of this.
Well, thanks, Kevin. Actually, yeah. I thought I was just going to, during the pandemic, I thought, okay, I'll just pull all this stuff together. And now I have an interesting vantage point because this is a window on a way of life that we're currently blocked out of. But it certainly has reawakened a lot of things. And people are saying, why aren't you reviewing restaurants anymore? I don't want to do that. That is exhausting. I don't want to. But the what I really like is the essay, the looking at things and making theories and observations and the social commentary aspect of it, and I am enjoying that. And interestingly, I'm finding that my attitude towards a lot of food has changed. I mean, everybody has pretty much simplified their approach to life over the last year and a half or 2 years, I would say, is a fair statement. And I've been eating a primarily plant-based diet initially for doctor's orders, and I can have some meat and some fish, and it's okay now. But I'm finding I got this wonderful book that is disgusting me. I got this wonderful book from Gastro Obscura that is just an encyclopedia of all this unusual food stuff from all over the world, little snippets, something that in my younger days I would have killed to be part of writing. And I'm finding that there are a lot of ways of preparing meat that actually repel me. And I'm thinking, ooh, wait a minute, something's happening here. So that's more than you asked, but there's an evaluative process that has kicked back in. So I'm not just eating for nutrition. I'm thinking about things a lot again. So who knows where that will lead? Maybe there will be. And eat, drink, and be wary, volume 2. There's no telling.
Here is a detour from the question of food, but once you open the kippered herring barrels and the Marx brothers are in the room, it can be hard to get those guys to leave. So Alexander Gorey wants to know, and is asking this question to both of us, but I'll pose it to you first, Kathy. Alexander says, I want my young relatives to start watching the Marx brothers. Where should they start, and how should I prepare them?
I would start with Monkey Business because it's chaos and it's just silly. And you don't have to know or understand anything. I would not start with Duck Soup. I started with Duck Soup with some friends of mine, and they just sat there straight faced. I've never seen anyone sit through that film straight faced. So my entry point would be something just as chaotic and ridiculous as Monkey Business. Noah?
I completely agree. Same answer. And monkey business is always my answer to that question, for the reasons Kathy says. And particularly, I think, for younger viewers, there's something about monkey business. It seems slightly more accessible. It plays slightly more like a contemporary comedy. And I think it might be a little easier entry for people, especially kids who may not be used to watching older films. So that's a double endorsement for monkey business. And let's just say, what a wonderful question. All those of you who have young people in your lives, expose them to the Marx Brothers, because if you do, there's a chance they may one day buy my book.
Yes, buy Noah's book.
Ken Hansen says, on the heels of Noah's comments, I'm one of the world's slowest readers. My copy arrived at 11 a.m. and I finished it by 5 p.m. A new record for me and so much fun.
Thank you.
Is that a kind of feedback that you get a lot of? Do people talk about consuming the book in one sitting and flying through it?
Either that or having it in nibbles. A lot of people like the fact that it's got all these little parts and they can read it at their leisure.
It's funny, we both used food language to talk about it. I talked about consuming the book, and then you said people will read it in nibbles. Yeah, that's right. It also is a book that is very worth returning to. When you first read it, you probably will read it from beginning to end. But then after you're familiar with it, it's a great book to just pick up and flip through, start at the beginning or the middle of any of the essays in it. It keeps rewarding your attention.
Thank you.
I want to ask you a few questions about your process as a writer, about the craft of your writing, partly because I'm interested in that, and I'm sure many of us are. It also seems like something you haven't gotten a chance to talk about as much in interviews and appearances around this book. So one of the, and you can take this in any direction you like, but one of the first things that I'm always curious about is about the gear, the tools. Do you normally write on paper? Do you compose at the computer? What does it look like when you sit down to write something?
These days, I compose at the computer. I, for years and years and years, wrote by longhand, always did much better that way. And the transition to the computer was agonizing because I found myself editing as I went along, which is not really good for a creative flow. The last writing workshop I took actually had people writing straight through, and like you were prohibited from taking your pen off the page. You could not go back and edit it, just let it go. And I was so startled by the natural flow of my thought process that drove home to me how damaging it was being to work to edit while I was writing. So I'm much more comfortable with just blurting it out and then going back and reworking it. I do take notes longhand. I have notebooks all over my house. Um, when I'm out in public, I will usually grab even a napkin and write on it. Even now, I have Evernote on my phone. I will sometimes put things on that. I will sometimes dictate a voice memo if something comes to me while I'm driving and I know this is a great phrase. I will forget this, but for the most part, I still work in the hand hand to paper. It's part of how it transmits.
And during your years of doing a lot of regular food writing, did you do any of your writing in restaurants? Was it surreptitious note taking under the table, or
Yes.
how did that work?
Legal pads on the table, talking to people as if I was conducting a business meeting, uh, scribbling things here and there. This is before cell phones largely. So now it's normalized. Take photos of your food. So that wouldn't draw attention at all. But when in the bulk of the time that I was doing this, other people I knew would do things like run to the restroom and scribble things down. And I actually ran into somebody, one of the Texas Monthly restaurant listers, excuse me, he did not review, actually tucked a little microphone into his cuff and he would talk into a tiny recorder.
And do you save your notes? Does the is the genesis of the pieces in this book, can it be traced in your archives?
At this point, I think they're destroyed. Yeah.
And how actively do you write normally these days?
Oh,
How much writing do you do? Do you write for yourself in addition to the things you write for the public? How much of your average day is spent writing, either physically or in your mind?
I write a lot of astrological material these days and probably well, multiple thousands of words a month. I'm not sure how often it goes on a weekly basis. And I do write a lot of stuff down in journals for myself. So it's extremely erratic. Sometimes it's a terrific amount on one day or 2 days, and other times it's just a little dribble.
Well, we're going to wrap this up in just a few minutes. So this will be the last call. If anyone in the virtual audience has any questions you'd like to ask Kathy, get them in the next little bit as we prepare to bring this down for a landing. One more question I want to ask you about writing is whether when you're writing about food, or if you're reviewing a restaurant or writing a piece like the ones collected in this book, does it feel like a different kind of process to you than when you're writing astrological insight or any of the other kinds of writing you do? I guess my question is writing, or do different kinds of writing feel and act differently?
Uh, they're all very different. There's reporting writing where I research and then talk to people and then come up with a clever and interesting and engaging way to express it. There's the more of the think piece commentary writing, and that just requires a lot of walks, a lot of thinking things through, a lot of seeing where my brain goes. And then there's the diaristic, oh my God, this happened, I have to write this down sort of writing. And there's a bunch of that in this book. Like, okay, let's just take notes real fast. And I had a response of this really happened. People need to know that this happened. And that's very different from the very when I was still doing legal writing. This all is it depends on the audience and what the purpose is. And the stuff I would guess what I like the most out of it is the diaristic report, like capturing the okay, this happened. And I tend to play a lot with my wording when I do that. I play with the language a bunch. And second would be the think pieces, the essays, the commentary. And there are times now, I'm like, when I look at junk food, I go, how did I think of some of this stuff? I don't even know now how I thought of it, but I did. Like, oh. That's actually insightful. How nice.
How do you feel about the sudden or fairly sudden ubiquity of social media and the amount of writing that we all do that is sort of off the cuff? Sometimes I find myself composing paragraphs just to post them on Facebook or Twitter, and taking care of the writing in a way that's a writerly habit that sometimes feels like a bit much for these platforms. Do you feel like you're writing when you post something on one of your social accounts?
It depends on what the purpose of it is, but I often will take great care because I am aware of how differently people take in information on a monitor and how attention spans are so truncated and people just don't fixate. And I really load it at the top, like give somebody a reason at the very beginning to want to read this, unless I'm in one of my, I'm just going to post something cryptic and see if anybody picks this up moods, which does happen now and again. And I'll just a little word to the wise, if you see me post some kind of really cryptic status line on Facebook, it's probably a quote from something I just watched.
Ah, that explains a lot. I'm going to have to read back in your timeline tonight. Amy Kuhn has some lovely comments as well as a question. Amy says, I read the book when I got it and now read little bits before bed, just
Oh,
like a hot toddy or a cup of cocoa.
oh,
Thank you for a fun read. That's very true. It's a really good bedside book. It's a good book for that kind of reading, particularly if as just as Amy says, if you've already read it once, keeping it around and reminding yourself of some of your favorite parts. It's a very good bedside book. So it's highly recommended to anyone with a bedside. And Amy's question is, have you ever considered writing a cookbook?
yes. I don't
That's a
know what,
decisive yes.
yes. And I have a potential, I actually, yeah. Okay. Yes, I have. And I don't know how far it'll go, but it's been kicking around. I
We
also
should
have,
mention.
Amy. I also have an astrological based one that's a humor book called "Eat Your Chart Out," um, but I can't find the notes. I have all these notebooks everywhere, and that one somehow got just filed strangely in the move from Texas to the Northeast.
Well, in addition to the out loud guffaw from me that you got for that title, in the chat, you've gotten a big ha with 3 exclamation points from Amy. And also enthusiasm for the cookbook possibility from Pat Bracken.
Oh, thank you,
We
Pat.
also should And we should mention too, for anyone who hasn't read the book yet, it's not a cookbook, but there are some recipes in here, and also some thoughts about cooking. Sometimes when sort of describing the book quickly, it's easy to make it sound like it's all restaurant reviews, but it's really not at all the case. There's some writing about restaurants, but there's many pieces in the book that approach food from another angle, including from a cooking angle. So it wouldn't be that big a departure to do a cookbook.
The funny thing about the one of the few recipes in there is uh, my redo of a Martha Stewart brownie recipe because I wanted to make it and didn't have the ingredients and I didn't want to go to the store. And I have a professor friend who has made this 4 times. My college advisor keeps making this and taking it to wine and he has a group of people in the neighborhood that will sit under the trees and drink wine and at tea time, and he keeps taking this there. I asked him for a photo of it. I think it's hysterical that he's made it that many times. I mean, you could just make the real recipe, but anyway.
I hadn't planned to ask you about this, but you remind me. Will you talk about your feelings about Martha Stewart for a moment?
Oh, okay. They went through a transformation. I really saw her for a very long time as setting up a model of perfection that no woman could possibly live up to. And I have heard tales of things that would go wrong in her own business and personal life because of her striving for that. And somebody put out a parody magazine called Is Martha Stewart Living? It was a parody of Martha Stewart Living. Um, but after she decided to plead guilty and do her time and just get it over with the securities conviction that she had, the securities claim, security, I don't even know specifically what she did. Might have been insider trading, not sure. Anyway, she just put on her big kid pants, went to jail, got it over with, taught women how to knit, improved the lives of people there, came back out now. And then I started looking at her recipes slightly differently. And her staff, her magazine, her media uses ingredients that are accessible to mere mortals. All right. So they don't make their recipes actually use things that you might conceivably have in your kitchen or could actually afford to buy, unlike what a lot of high-end cooking magazines still indulge in. So I have come to absolutely respect her. Not sure I'd want to hang with her, but I respect how she's steered her life and what she does for. I don't see it so much as this horrible, oh my God, there's no way any human could possibly do all this anymore.
I like that, and your comments about her in the book are very interesting, and they did feel to me like perhaps the tip of an iceberg. So thanks for showing us some of the underwater portion. Well, I think it is. Yeah, we're closing in on 8:30. Perhaps it is getting to be time to say goodnight. But before we draw the curtain, we have had a couple of questions that have pointed in the direction of your future and upcoming projects. The possibility of a Confessions of a Third-Rate Goddess, maybe a book in the near future, and there also could be a cookbook. But I know you have other things to say on this subject too. What are you working on? What are you thinking about working on? And what can we expect to see from you in the future?
I'm actually working on Confessions of a Third-Rate Goddess. It will largely be, there'll be a few Houston Press columns. For a while, I did have a column in the back pages of the Houston Press on anything that I wanted to write about, which led to really disturbing fan mail, which I will also have bits about. So those will be a little bit of Houston Press stuff and a lot of stuff from my zine, primarily about relationships. And then a few other odd things that I am actively working on. I have gotten a lot of nudges to finally move on The Kid's Guide to the Cosmos. Another round of small children has entered my environment, and the ones that I initially thought up the book for are having their own kids now. So it's kind of like, you better just go ahead and do this. And then I have several other books that are outlined, just not done yet. So,
Well, I'm sure. I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I'll just leave it there.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm sure everyone in attendance and many more join me in looking forward to those books. And, if you need any design help, let me know.
I think that's a given. And thank you so much for hosting this, Noah.
And thank you. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for your writing. Thank you for your thoughts and words. We've all been very well nourished tonight in terms of entertainment and ideas. And as Amanda's earlier comment suggested, I think we're all ready for nourishment of a more primal kind as we get a little deeper into the evening. Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you for your questions. And just on a personal note, thanks for involving me in this project, Kathy. I'm so
yeah.
happy to be associated with it. And
I don't
just
think anybody could have carried my vision out like you did. So thank you.
And we should also say that Matthew Foster, who is another very good friend of Kathy's, had a lot to do with the look also. The cover design, I made a few changes to it, but Matthew and Kathy are really responsible for this cover, including the title treatment. And that was the seed of all the design decisions made throughout the book. So I share the design credit with Matthew and also with Kathy herself.
Great.
Any parting words?
Thanks to everybody. And I'm happy to hang out with cameras on with anybody that wants to just visit after I turn the recording off. Keep me from getting into trouble. So.
So anyone who would like to do that, hang around in the lobby and talk to Kathy, you feel free to turn your cameras and microphones on and proceed.
Okay, I'm turning the
Thank
recording
you.
up. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.